Pamela Geller, first question. You talked in the meeting just then about Muslim Brotherhood operatives having infiltrated CPAC. Can you elaborate? What's the evidence for that?
We are here to fight the Ground Zero Mosque. As far as the evidence that was presented, the checks to Grover Norquist, they're online. Do me a favor. I know you can do it. Google Grover Norquist Muslim Brotherhood checks.
So is he a card-carrying member?
You know, this is Rosaline Talon. She's a 9/11 family member. She lost her brother. We just did an event that was 2 hours long. We did it.
Oh, I see. You know what
it's a fight for the Ground Zero Mosque. If you want to talk about that, I think we should.
I was raising something that you raised in the event.
Well, I could say about. I would like for CPAC to have really embraced this topic,
and they didn't.
And that's that.
How did they not embrace it?
This is not part of CPAC. They've actually distanced themselves from it.
It's very upsetting to me as a 9/11 family member and a conservative and a pro-lifer. It's upsetting to me that CPAC wouldn't embrace this. I thought this was going to be like one of the main things because, my goodness, we're in the throes of didn't our CIA or somebody lately say that we're in the throes of terror. We could be attacked anytime. That if we can't grasp how serious the threat is, and we're not talking about Ground Zero Mosque, we're not talking about this, what are we talking about?
So do you think it's CPAC as a whole that has failed? Do CPAC or the conservative movement as a whole that doesn't recognize this?
All these wonderful people in here today, all these conservatives, so empathetic, so feeling what we all felt back in 9/11/01. I'm just wondering what the leadership of CPAC is doing. How do they feel about this Ground Zero Mosque issue?
To your question, clearly the 12,000 that show up, these are individuals, which, by the way, is the basic premise of the conservative movement, the premise of individual rights. So no, the Conservative Party hasn't failed. Clearly the leadership, just look at the panels. Look at the panels, Justin, and then look at the Daily News headlines. And they are completely out of touch with what's going on.
Let me ask you, because you bring up the Daily News headlines, what do you think about what's happening in Egypt right now? Mubarak leaving. I mean, are you happy about it, or?
I think it's catastrophic what's happening in the Middle East, that every single one of U.S. allied Muslim countries are undergoing unrest, and in some cases severe revolution. I'm very, very worried because, you know, nothing happens for decades, and then decades happen in a day. And what we're witnessing is an earthquake. There's an earthquake in the Middle East. And while just like in '79 with Iran, these protests were started in earnest, and they were even back then, the little cover revolution in Iran in June of 2009, where millions took to the streets and were slaughtered. And there was Neda Sultan, and nobody ever talked about her. I mean, they're not slaughtering people in the streets of Egypt. And Egypt, while Mubarak certainly had deficiencies, but like Sand Monkey, an Egyptian blogger, said to me in an interview in 2007, said after the Democrats took the Congress, the pressure was off Mubarak to make democratic reform. There was a distinct change in the Egyptian, the democratic reforms being imposed by the Bush doctrine. He said this at the time. I have the audio. He also said it.
So you think Bush was actually effective in getting democratic change in Egypt?
Absolutely. And that's not according to me, that's according to Egyptian young bloggers, so on and so forth. He also noted to me, Sand Monkey, that when Nancy Pelosi met with Assad in Syria, the day after she left, dissidents and reformers were rounded up and arrested. When you give tacit approval to evil, you don't know what hell is unleashed. Because listen, America is the driving force for good in the world, and maybe she's despised because of the hatred of the good for being the good. I'm very worried about Egypt. I'm worried about Egypt. I'm worried about Jordan. I'm worried about Tunisia. I'm worried about Algeria. I'm worried about Lebanon. I mean, we're talking about cataclysmic events. So I pray that the army can control.
So you don't. But just the bottom line is, do you support the protesters or no, or is it not that simple?
I support everybody yearning to be free, but democracy does not mean freedom. Mob rule does not mean freedom, and evil loves a vacuum. So if, let's say, the Brotherhood, for example, the Muslim Brotherhood, is the only organization that's to seize control because they're very well organized. They've been planning behind the scenes for a very, very long time.
They've been waiting for this.
They've been. It's deeply disturbing. I mean, the beauty of the movement was that these are all kids and all social networking. Take to the street, want greater freedoms, but they don't. Baraday's not their leader. Baraday is Iranian proxy. I mean, so I think a smooth transition, and I use that term very loosely because it's so difficult, would be Suleiman. I do. So we have to see. Nobody can predict what's going to happen.